So it's good to welcome you. I've really enjoyed our talks, and I like the literature. I've read it a good deal, and it's very, very well put together, very thoughtful. And I know we're going to learn a lot about questions that are on the mind of a great many people concerning the financial system, the implications of what happened after September 2008, and so forth. And you've got great thought, and welcome very much to Conversations.
Why, thank you.
And in the audience, let me introduce, it's Harry L. Langer, and he's the head of his own company, Harry L. Langer and Co., and he's interested in economics and a number of other things on a very comprehensive and very thoughtful pattern of giving a great deal of thought to matters of economic policy and so forth. And Harry, welcome so much. Glad you could get over here to the studio.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad you invited me.
It was my good pleasure. We met at a, remember, we met at a salon with Miss Linford.
That's correct.
It was really good, interesting, a lot of interesting people. We've done Solomon, he was there, and others that were there, thoughtful people. And the salon's a very interesting place for people who are intellectually curious to get together. And so it comes out of that. But could you share, Harry, if you would, with me? We've had some telephone conversation, your own background. I already understand you were drug up in Yonkers or something like that. But share your background, born and raised, and then we'll get into some of the policy decisions or policy suggestions you have in the voluminous papers that you've written on the economy.
Well, I was born and brought up in Yonkers, and I was born in 1932, December 31st. And
just made it in under the wire of the new year, huh?
That's correct.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it wasn't a tax deduction at that time.
Right.
I don't think there was an IRS.
Yeah.
And I went through the Yonkers school system.
Okay.
And I worked my way through NYU.
Okay, all right.
NYU.
As an undergraduate?
As an undergraduate.
Right.
And I took some graduate courses in marketing and other things that of interest to me in City College.
Okay.
The Baruch School, which I found to be an excellent...
The what school?
Baruch.
Baruch, on 23rd Street?
Yes.
Yeah, Baruch, yeah, sure.
It was a very superb school for one reason. The professors that taught were actually in the business.
Okay, they were in the real world. Yeah.
So they gave you real insight into the real world.
And you are practically, you're thinking in practical terms about the human condition and economics and so forth.
Well, not only economics, there's a lot of other aspects to it. You know, climate control. You know, the alternative types of aid, international governance. A number of issues that occur to most people.
Glass-Steagall.
And
foreclosures that are coming.
Yeah, foreclosures, how to solve them. I like to address problems.
Yes, right.
And solve them in a practical, minimum cost way.
Okay, very good. Okay.
And
that's a very important issue that's still on the minds of many as we grope for some sort of a new way of dealing with things, it seems to me.
Well, the problem, I think the intellectual people are too close to the book, and they don't think too much outside the box. They're conditioned by their education. They're conditioned by the society they are involved with, and their thinking gets channeled.
Or tunnel visioned.
Well, not so much tunnel. They're very bright. I'm not saying they're not bright.
Oh yeah.
But the problem is they don't think in a creative way outside the box.
Outside of their own area of expertise.
That's correct.
They have a saying we've all heard is that wars are too important to be left to the generals. There's some who say that economics is too important to be left to the economists because they're too tunnel visioned.
You're right. The problem, they're experts in history.
Right.
They understand the problems. Very few, you can count them on your hand, that have solutions that make sense.
Or have through time. We have the canon, Keynes and Schumpeter and Van Hayek and all of that. We have the canon of the people. It's generally, economics is understood, and that informs the political process.
Right. And so what I do is I look at these various crises. You know, I've done this all my life, by the way. I've devoted almost 50% of my time free to this as a public service.
Right.
To make my life count and be a responsible citizen.
Good for you. Yeah.
And I do it cost-free because if you charge for any of this stuff, people own you.
That's very interesting.
You haven't got freedom of action. I never take a dime for anything I do.
That's really interesting.
Outside my business, you know.
Yeah.
And And I've always had that attitude, and I've always, tried to make my life count.
We ought to think about having you as a producer here at cable, public access cable television, because here it's all done without any money exchange between anybody involved. It's all just free floating ideas and so forth, without having to be thinking of it as a business or exchanging money value with people.
From my little experience with you, it's too complex for me.
Well, I don't know.
It's too technical, too involved.
No.
I'm not bad at writing the stuff.
Okay.
But in terms of organizing a program or a system of programs, I don't think that's my skill.
Well, you don't want to become a Steven Spielberg?
No.
The world's very quickly moving multimedia, you understand.
You're the expert in that area.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interfere. I'm just trying to recruit you, sir. We'd like to have good talent here.
Well, if I can help in any way.
Yeah, and you have a legitimate yen or try to help improve the human condition.
That is correct.
That's the bottom line. Yeah, right.
That is correct.
Okay.
There's no reason why people can't develop their potential.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, on the other side of that coin, they should have a sense of responsibility for individual development to improve themselves so they also can contribute. The problem in our society, as I see it, we're too self-indulgent. Our morals and ethics are very shallow. And that's one of the reasons I think the Muslim world is so anti-American in the West, is because they don't share our values.
Well, that's a biggie. Yeah, that's a big dialect. What they're talking about, the clash of civilization, Mr. Huntington and things. And that's the enemy du jour now, it seems, is the Muslim world vis-a-vis the West.
Well, I think...
in the minds of many, anyway.
In the minds of many. But as they prosper, they'll develop less parochial values, unfortunately.
They have some very interesting ideas about economic theory, particularly out of Indonesia and other scholarly circles, where they have what they call, if I may, I don't want to divulge, go off, but they have what they call Sharia-compliant financing, which avoids, unlike the West, the proscription by most of our wisdom schools against usury.
Well, usually it's more or less interest. They don't charge interest.
Usurious interest. And
they don't charge interest, I don't believe.
They have methods of doing their capital formation without the overall, like the huge credit card, 20-30% interest and late charges and all that. That becomes, we've gotten around that proscription in the West. And there's many other than people like Osama bin Laden who are, the larger context, but in terms of economic theory, they may have some ideas that could resonate that would be relevant to our improving in a system's qualitatively important way, the system that we've inherited and assumed to be the march of history.
Well, unfortunately, I can't really comment on that because I don't know too much about Sharia.
There's a lot of propaganda directed at it because that's in the minds of many. That's our enemy now. It used to be communism. Now it's them. I don't want to get off. I'm sorry. I don't want to get off on my thinking.
We don't want to start a cold war with the Arabs or the Muslims.
It looks like we're about to do it. What happened in the Mediterranean just recently with that Gaza thing is really stirring the waters. And
well, I think they're making a big to-do out of nothing, and I think it was a put-up deal to embarrass Israel. And to break, allegedly, by the Hamas and Hezbollah to sort of break the embargo on Gaza. But Israel has a real problem with security. Yeah. Because when Sharon pulled out of Gaza and they left all the manufacturing facilities and all the farm operations that they had free for the Gazans, what did they do? They destroyed it all. Destroyed every bit of it, and then started shooting rockets over the border into Israel.
Well, that's the thing that gets into the politics.
So the problem over there really is if it's a matter of land, they can always negotiate something with the Palestinians, give or take. But the real issue is a matter of survival. The Hamas doesn't respect or doesn't want Israel to exist.
They don't recognize the historical legitimacy of the state of Israel.
Well, it's not that so much. They just don't want Israel to exist because they want Arab hegemony in that whole region.
Well,
they don't want an outsider.
But to say they don't recognize the legitimacy of the establishment of the State of Israel from the get-go. So it would be a thing where you could take that kind of a position if you say, well, although a lot of the Arab states already say we'll recognize if you come back to 67 and that, but that's a different kind of negotiation.
But every country over there is artificial. They were all created after the First World War. They were all part of the Turkish Empire. They were divided up among the British and the French and other interested parties. Yeah. And eventually, the U.S. got in there because of the oil interests.
Right. That's right.
But the problem that's a whole.
But anyway,
that's a very difficult area to get into.
That's probably the most dangerous area of the world. Yeah. That and Kashmir, I think, and there's a resurgence among the Muslims that I think is going to be coming into the fore. But anyway, that's getting off onto politics and things, and we don't want to go there particularly.
The funny thing about that, there's a natural mutuality there. Israel is very advanced technically and educationally. The Palestinians are very talented, able, intelligent people. There's a natural sense of mutual interest here. They can learn all the technology and be the advanced producers of all the same kind of technology that Israel does. Israel has wonderful universities.
Well, that's been the mark of the Western colonizing of other parts of the world that was going to, take over the peoples and teach them our ways. That's the mark of Rome. That's the mark of imperialism. We've got the history is on our side. You're backward, so you're going to become like us. And what they did to the American Indian.
I don't mean it in that sense.
No, but I mean there's a metaphor there.
But in the sense that they can advance educationally and technically, which they are.
I was just suggesting, sir, that we could advance over what's coming out of intellectuals' quarters of what we call the backward part of the world. Civilization began in Mesopotamia, not here.
But you can't.
They could be telling us things about economics that are important in terms of getting a system that we've gotten ourselves into because our system is not able to deal with what the future requires. What they're introducing, we would learn from them at a serious level intellectually, rather than just assuming like we did with the Indians that they're backward people and we're going to turn them into us.
Well, we're sort of comparing apples with oranges.
Well, maybe.
And we can learn a lot from their culture. And their
economic theory.
And their philosophy.
And their economic theory.
And perhaps I don't know that much about it, so I can't really make a judgment.
Do you make any association with the term imperialism of the West or colonization of the West from 500 years after Columbus or anything like that?
Well, that was on both sides of the equation here. The Arab world exploited the Africans in North Africa. But I don't want to go into that.
We shouldn't go into that because we got a lot of theory with the economics here, which you're very concerned with, and that gets off into another way of thinking and everything. But anyway, you went to Baruch in that, and then you took an undergraduate degree in economics?
Well, a number of subjects.
Yeah, okay.
I took some basic economics courses.
Right.
I took English. I minored in English. I took a lot of different types of courses that were interesting to me, like biology and chemistry, and marketing. It's just a variety of things that because I'm a sort of curious type of individual.
Yeah,
and I like to be versed in a lot of areas.
You're intellectually curious at an age that has so much to be curious about.
Well, I'm not an intellectual, but I'm curious.
Yeah, right. Very good. Yeah.
And only to this extent I like to understand a problem and have a solution. Now, getting back to economics or society in general, the real problem is jobs, job opportunity, and the training, skill training, and education to go with them. Because if you can't have a productive base, you cannot support a service society. We have a wrong economic policy in this country. We don't have an industrial policy.
We don't. They argue against it,
Right, which is ridiculous
because
we're losing the economic war to China. We're actually in economic warfare.
Did we used to say the same thing about Japan when they were buying RCA and everything?
Absolutely correct.
Rockefeller Center, and we were all worried about the Asian menace.
Yes.
you know. Yeah, so is it a repeat of that, or is there something qualitatively new with the Chinese challenge?
Well, we put ourselves in a position where it was a basic, I think, era in business school philosophy, where they go for the fast buck. Everything is stockholder return.
All right.
Instead of years ago, when the corporations had a social aspect to what their activities were.
Okay.
They were concerned about the community. They were concerned about housing. They were concerned about a number of other things, not only the bottom line, what was good for the country.
What about the period leading up to TR and what they called the robber barons and the growth of capital formation and where it got very, very concentrated, J.P. Morgan? We always had a few people who owned everything compared to everybody else. It wasn't one, they weren't necessarily, he gave it away in the end for libraries and things, understand, philanthropy. But we didn't have a system that was democratically distributing buying power or ownership of capital or other assets to everybody in a way that would be good if you were really believing in democracy rather than plutocracy.
Well, you all, unfortunately, the way the world is, the way the human being is, each individual has different talents and interests.
Right.
Okay? And there's some people who can generate great wealth and great industries and have that ability to create employment for a number of other people, also create massive wealth. Now, the robber barons, in most cases, were industrialists, where they built industries, even though they were exploitive.
Standard Oil.
They were exploitive.
Yeah.
But today
railroads,
today we have different kind of barons. They're financial barons.
Oh, when did that come into be, where it was so all financial? Was that in this recent or something where the financial capitalism became so prominent?
That's correct, because we don't produce anything anymore.
Right.
So we've exported our industry and our wealth, our financial ability.
Outsourced it all.
Outsourced it. Instead of outsourcing or selling, exporting goods and services. We export industries and wealth, our capital.
Why do we do that? Why have we done that?
Well, first of all, I think a misconception on the part of government and business schools, where they think we can exist in a service society.
Okay.
You've got to produce something to afford the services.
Right.
No great country can be a great country without having a balanced economy.
Okay.
You have to have production. So what we've done in the last
50 years? No.
Not last 10 or 20 years.
10 or 20 only, you're saying?
Okay. About 20 years. It started about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Shortly after.
18 or 1980 or 80, 90?
Yeah, about the second.
With Reagan, maybe, or not?
Well, right, Reagan.
Paul Volcker?
Basically Reagan.
Reagan,
Business can take care of itself. The profit and loss aspect of business will sort of keep it in check.
Yeah.
And the less government regulation, the better. But look what we have.
Yeah. He said, government's not the solution, government's the problem. Get government off your back.
But the problem is our economy. Our economy is so complex.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
That you need a certain amount of regulation. Just take, for example, look what happened in the financial sector.
Yeah.
First of all, these great financiers don't produce anything.
Okay.
They may supply capital to aid businesses to develop, but that's not their main interest. Their main interest is making money for themselves, and they're very exploitive. They suck the capital out of society. They have targeted companies they want to take over at the expense.
Mergers and acquisitions have been going.
That's at the expense of they target stockholders. So they take these companies. Sometimes they overpay for them, but they take them. They sell off their good divisions, and to get their to recoup all their capital, and what's left can't support the debt service on the purchase price.
Right. Okay.
So they can employees, right?
Right.
And they reduce the productivity, or else they produce it overseas.
Right. They're treating the people. Esmark was bought by Norton or something, and they had 40,000 employees. They went along just like serfs on a feudal estate. I mean, the workers that
Right.
made up the company. It was just like they just went with they were like serfs in a feudal estate kind of thing with the. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's just interesting.
Well, that's true. I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Yeah, but you see, they did that. That was something you had it coming from a Reagan time,
Yeah.
or something, and then that's when the swaps and derivatives started coming in seriously. I guess they've been there for a long time as an insurance thing.
Well, first of all, what they did do, in my view,
yes, sir.
they've exported for the fast buck instead of creating long-term markets like the Japanese were doing, which is very smart. We were looking for the short-term buck. We started producing overseas to take advantage of allegedly the lower wage rates.
There must have been a revolution in transportation that made that containerization,
Right.
and supply chains that could be strung out all
That is
around the
correct.
globalizing world. Yeah, it's technology advancing. Yes,
Right. And what they did, but now we're in a very dangerous phase. Not only are we producing overseas, we gave them the low profit goods.
Okay.
The things that were not the tchotchkes that weren't essential to the economy. Today, what we're doing is exporting our high technology.
Yeah, they're making 737s over there and airplanes and large things. Yeah.
The only thing that we really produce.
What do we produce anymore?
Well, that's one of the great
debt
things.
service.
Yeah, debt service, right. But what the great thing we produced was our airplanes, commercial airplanes, as well as military.
And some things in the realm of high tech that we've had to keep leading edge.
Yes,
information technology.
Right, you got Microsoft, you got Intel, you got all these great
big
companies,
big
and IBM,
important.
and they're producing overseas. But not only that, they're building multi-billion-dollar plants over there and being financed by Wall Street, who's getting practically free money from the Federal Reserve open market window to finance the buildings in China.
That's right, and then China buys
India.
up all our debt.
That's
all
correct.
our T-bills are bought by them.
That's absolutely.
And it's getting really out of hand, isn't it?
It's not really out of hand. They're pretty soon they'll be telling us what to do.
Yeah.
They're going to be the creditor and we're the debtor.
Well, there are people who project that. You're in touch with
Niall Ferguson.
Niall Ferguson, and he's looking at things, and don't they see a lot of the people understanding the trends? They say that China's going to emerge as the major power in the next 20 years or something like that, and they got their eye on that ball.
Yeah, I think Niall Ferguson and Nouriel Roubini and Stiglitz and a few others understand this situation pretty well and been warning our government about it.
Yeah.
Our government doesn't seem to heed their warnings.
Well, Mr. Paulson came in on the 20th of September with that 3-page thing, remember, of 2008, and said, you've got to pass this, have it on the president's desk in a week, or the whole world's going to fall apart.
Wow.
So they had to bail out the whole economy and everything, and then they had the health care thing they put through, and the deficits are getting to be unsustainable, are they not?
That's true, but they bailed out their buddies in Wall Street, in my view.
Well, was that necessary?
I don't believe it was necessary at all.
They let Lehman.
They let Lehman go. Well, Lehman had a lot. Lehman, from when you start reading between the lines and analyzing their investments, they had some very bad investments.
Did they? Okay.
But a lot of this bailout was absolutely necessary.
It was in order for the economy not to just fall apart, which we can't allow.
I disagree with that. The economy would not have fallen apart.
They would not. Thank you. Okay.
They've taken over AIG.
Yes.
And AIG has been used because they credit default swaps.
Yeah.
Has been used as a conduit to bail out on the buddy system certain Wall Street firms, certain banks, favored banks.
And they're all getting their bonuses.
And not only that, the government took it over and paying. The AIG became a conduit from the Treasury to the Wall Street people who caused the crisis
in the first
to begin
place,
with. It's a disgrace. It should never have been done. They should. They could have not given them 100 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
They could have given 50 cents on the dollar, they would have taken it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And not only that, because the public pensions and some municipality investments were
all they're all
involved.
In deficit. They're all in deficit.
Yeah, but they were involved in buying all the
subprime.
Subprime CBOs.
Yeah.
They could have given them 75% on the dollar.
Okay.
So the loss to them wouldn't be so horrific, and people who are in retirement could at least have some reasonable guarantee of survival. There's many things they could have done that they couldn't have done. They could have allowed the banks, or insisted that in return for the money they were giving the banks and Wall Street, that they in turn would lend to American business.
Yes, right. They're not doing it.
And they're not doing
sitting at it at all.
What they're doing is building plants, or financing plants in China and India, and doing other things.
The same old thing that got us in
and
trouble.
speculating in the stock market with free money out of the reserve windows.
Out of the open window.
That's absolutely correct. It's a disgrace. That has to be stopped.
It should be. And what Dodd Committee? Did you follow what they were doing?
Yes, but they're still not doing it right.
Sense? They're not doing it right. Okay.
What they should do is that only legitimate that any banks, it has to be a legitimate commercial or savings bank that can come out of that window. Okay. They have to, whatever money they take out of it has to be invested in loans to American business and no other purpose.
Is that not, there's not
or,
any of
or
that?
operating purposes.
Yeah, that's not, none of that's written into what they're proposing at all?
I don't know what they're
form?
proposing. It's been changed so many times. I don't know what's going on. And so many lobbyists and so many special interests involved.
I know. And
so many different viewpoints in Congress who are protecting their own interest and their special interests to support them. But you never know what's going to come out of these things.
How can we look at it? We got a date in a certain sense. You say we've been going and everything. And one of the things, subprime, a lot of that had to do, and your writings are really interesting. I know you say that, was it Stiglitz?
Yeah, right.
Or that, not Stiglitz, Stiegel. It was from the Depression days, ought to be reinstated.
Absolutely.
To separate investment from commercial, and that's something important. And thing we ought to put a moratorium on foreclosures.
Yes,
is something that you have proposed, which rang a bell with me, and it came out of the subprime where they were giving loans to people to buy a home. And so many of those, they defaulted, and that was based on the principle that for 50 years, the appreciation of the value of residential real estate had gone up, and you could live off the growth of a value that's going to occur 10 years out from when you buy it and that sort of thing. And that fell up, and it was, those loans were not valid in terms of what would be seen by prudent investment thinking.
Well,
that was part of the big problem?
Absolutely. Well, that's part of it. But the underlying that was misplaced philosophy.
Okay.
They wanted to have everybody a homeowner.
Well, now, it would be good if everybody could be a homeowner, would it not?
That's right.
That would be a democratic thing that would be good.
Only if they can afford it through their own efforts. Okay.
Only if they can afford it through
their own efforts.
What, if I may, through their own efforts. Why through their own efforts rather than through their own capability to have the money to meet the payments? So it would be an income distribution question.
Well, not necessarily.
It doesn't necessarily have to be tied into their effort in terms of like a job.
Yes, it has to, unless they're independently wealthy.
Unless you have a different way of making them independently wealthy, or a different way of getting income.
I don't want to get into this Kelso stuff.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sort of grounded over there.
Yeah, you are sort of. You
want to get into
bias in that area.
Yeah,
there was a misplaced philosophy that everybody was entitled, whether they could afford it or not, a home.
Well,
and what they were doing, they were forcing. They were forcing.
Literally
forcing banks to make loans to people who really.
FHA, do you think was that or no? Or just
well, it started they encouraged it. It was started in the Clinton administration, basically in a big way.
Oh, it was back before that. FHA.
Well, it started, but basically, well, it could have been, but it really came into the fore.
Yeah, okay, right.
In the Clinton administration, this redlining stuff, when they had everybody had to own a home, and they were giving people mortgages to buy a home that actually couldn't meet the payments. They had no jobs. They had no jobs. They couldn't afford.
They didn't have sufficient income that the job would have given them.
That's
at a wage that would make it possible to meet those payments.
That's absolutely correct. That's why.
So they were poor. essentially.
They were poor. The poor couldn't afford the debt service.
So let the poor stay poor. Is that what we're saying?
No. Let the poor have jobs and the training to go with them. That's why I've always been interested in job development.
Okay, yeah.
See, basically...
Well, you're in keeping with the basic premise. The basic policy grounding statement for the United States of America out of Keynes and Schumpeter and all of that is the Employment Act of 1946, is it not?
Well, I'm not too familiar.
We're going to distribute income to the people, not through the
You're getting back to Kelso again.
Not Kelso, it's Keynes and everything. We're going to distribute income to them through their labor participation in production. But the only way that the stiffs, the working stiffs, had a way of having any piece of a capital asset that's going to appreciate through time was residential property. They didn't have any ownership of the capital assets that are producing the wealth. You see, the capital assets are all held by a small plutocratic class.
Necessarily. Stock ownership is pretty diverse in this country, and people can say, if people have a decent job,
yes,
in other words, in order to get the decent job, you have to have a society that produces things. But they also have to have the education, skill training to go with them.
To get the decent job, to qualify for it.
That's correct, and you have to have the job there for them to take the job.
And that's completely in keeping with the general conventional wisdom in our economy, where we have to create jobs, and we don't. Keynes warned against a huge technologically induced massive unemployment for the grandchildren from 1930, and the technology is Hewlett-Packard just laid off 8,000 people because they're automating. The whole thing is all being automated. And so he warned against that, so that the idea of having jobs distributing income through labor participation as a guy in an assembly line or something isn't going to work in the minds of many people.
Well, but Hewlett-Packard is in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're going to come up with new technology that's going to require production and these people to come back in and produce this stuff.
That's the record of history, is that the new technology... My grandmother... Henry Ford worked in, I think I told you just on the phone, I was in Detroit. My granddaddy was a union organizer, and Henry Ford, when he was 10 years old, my grandmother's, on my paternal side, on 16th Street in Detroit, Henry Ford, when he was 10 years old, tinkered in the garage. And it used to be all agricultural workers, family farmers, milking Bossy the cow and everything at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. Then it all came combines, and then everybody went to Detroit, and they got a job on the assembly line. They created jobs, $5 a day, Mr. Ford and everything like that. But that paradigm is apparently, in the minds of some, not going to work any longer, that we can have all the capital assets owned by one small class, and everybody else is a worker, like feudal serfs on a feudal estate, where the capital assets of the industrial economy are all owned by a tiny class that lives on in the castle keep or the the gated community up on the hill.
Well, I don't think that it's.
You're not going to be able to create the new job. You're not going to be able, unless you forestall markets. If you're not going to forestall markets or innovation.
Innovation will create the new jobs.
Well,
it has to be in high technology, and that's the only area where we can compete in the global economy.
But the high technology, leading edge information technology, is in the process of rendering unnecessary the input by labor, human labor, to automated systems.
No, but there's all sorts of different types of production in high technology that will be introduced in innovation, all types of new products. But instead of producing it overseas, they should produce it here.
Well, that I certainly agree with. We should be doing. And are we still in the leading edge in terms of research and development?
We're starting to lose it. We're starting to lose it. And we're losing it because all our real high-tech stuff that we've developed over the last 50 years, right, has been transferred overseas, and we're training their engineers to be our competitors overseas in factories that we're building in other countries. We've got to bring that back. And I wrote a high-tech export free zone light industrial job development program for the major urban centers, which have over 70% of the population of this country.
Really? Okay.
And you develop, you produce high-value, small, easily transportable products that can be distributed around the world via the air
on free market
or sea on a free market principle, and and of course you'll have a domestic market as well.
Yes.
But it has to be high value stuff.
Okay.
And then you not only do you produce the stuff, you need people and have to train people to repair it. And you have to build the machine goods to produce this stuff.
Well,
and you have to repair that stuff. But we need more engineers. And we're not producing engineers because the
we're
best
not.
and
Why
brightest-
aren't we? Why doesn't the market produce the engineers if there's a place and a good job for the engineers like they used to do with tool and die and everything before CAD CAM?
That's
and
correct.
everything?
But now,
why aren't we just working it out that way so people are following the path toward better wages?
One of the reasons we've exported a lot of the manufacturing facilities.
That's for sure.
And that's for sure. So the best and
because
brightest,
of low labor costs.
Yes, but now
slave labor, yeah.
But not only labor costs now. Now they're doing it for more or less efficiency reasons. They don't want to have to pay pensions.
That's right.
Have to pay health care.
Yeah, right.
They don't have to do any of this stuff.
Right, right.
If they produce it overseas.
Nor do they have to be concerned with ecological questions of externalities.
Right.
And
so what
forth.
they're doing,
they can pollute the hell out of the place.
So they're exploiting populations in third world and other rising industrial economies.
And getting a percentage profit on that
That's
rather
correct.
than here.
And using our capital.
Using our capital, all the open window at the Federal Reserve to do it.
Absolutely correct.
So somebody ought to raise a red flag. I think you have.
Well, I'm trying to, but
yes,
they got to listen to you first.
Yeah, right.
You know, I haven't.
Well, you're talking to, what's his name?
I'm talking to a lot of people,
no,
but
that guy, what's his name again? Ferguson, right?
Ferguson.
He's a bright fellow.
Yes,
and
he's
who's
one
the guy
of
down at NYU?
Nouriel Roubini, another one.
He's brilliant.
Then you have Stiglitz.
And there's
and you have Simon Johnson, and you have a number of really Ken Rogoff. You have a lot of very bright guys who understand the problem.
Right. Are they getting heard by the administration?
Well, I don't think so,
Congress?
because I think the mindset in the administration is one that they've gotten from established. It came from the business schools, like Harvard, and Wharton and Stanford, and MIT.
Stern School.
Well, I don't know about.
Yeah, Balmo
probably
down there, and that.
You know, for the instead of building markets for the fast buck, and the captains of industries who are now came out of that kind of intellectual milieu, revising the government.
Okay.
So they're giving the government, they're setting the government policies.
Right.
So we're no longer the industrial country we were when we first started out that made us great and strong.
Okay. What could we talk for a second at a level? I know you're practical and all that, and you got there's a lot of interest, and there's very worried. Remember stagflation that we had and all that. But anyway, and there's people covering all that. If we look at the canon of economic theory that I assume to a certain degree informs the political process and the thought about policy. I remember in 1972, Mr. Nixon, our president at the time, said, "We're all Keynesians now." Do you remember him famously making that statement? What are we all now? What is it that informs the economic policy, the political process from the economic theory? Is it Schumpeter? Is it Van Hayek? Is it Friedman? Is it still remnants of Keynes? What is the theory about the economic system in economic terms from the canon that is motivating the structure and the thinking politically about the world economy now, as best you're able to discern?
Well, I don't really want to get into that because then you're talking economic theory and stuff, which is actually really meaningless. But your
it's meaningless?
Your point is very valid in this sense.
Okay.
The mindset is conditioned by the prevailing wisdom.
Right, the conventional wisdom.
The conventional wisdom, right, which is wrong.
Okay, that's important. Yeah.
It's contrary to the philosophy this country was built upon.
And the philosophy this country was built upon was Adam Smith?
The business of this country was business.
Oh, right.
And that's what it was about.
Right.
And now it's no longer business.
When did it shift?
Well, it shifted in the last 20 years.
Last 20 years only, since Mr. Reagan's time, more or less. Yeah. Okay.
And the pattern has been getting worse and worse over the last 20 years. And that's why we don't have an industrial base anymore. So unless we bring it back, we're going to be a second-rate power.
What about this idea in your writings? I read it's really good, and you write beautifully. You know how to write a really meaningful declarative sentence, which is very encouraging in this time. Your writing is very interesting and holds together very, very well. I would recommend all to be in touch with your writing, but. The glass is
basic English and Economics 101.
No, but you write beautifully, and you have a way of linking things together, and you've got certain thoughts. And one is the Glass-Steagall. Could you explain that? You think that's important. Another one is, let's put a moratorium on foreclosure for a 3 or 5 year period for the market to read it. No more of these panic sales and things like that. Could you lay out those two things would be really important. Glass-Steagall, what's important about that?
Well, you got to separate the banking aspect of banks from the speculation aspect of banks.
Is that the same as in my way of thinking?
Because it's too risky.
Okay, when I think of Kelso and everything, I know you don't like it, but we need to have a thing connected to the Fed that deals with swaps and derivatives are a way of dealing with various levels of risk within the economic order, and it was creative. It could be done. It goes back to olive markets and things. But the thing is, you're going to have to make a distinction in terms of a change that links the Fed to a way of dealing with risk. It was all done within the private sector.
Well,
and the thing is, on that private sector scale, you got to make a distinction between plain vanilla, water projects and things that are housing and things that are plain vanilla, and then all the crapshoot venture stuff. Is that not something that we have to make a distinction between? And is Glass-Steagall interested in that distinction?
Well, Glass-Steagall
it was in the 30s, right?
Yeah. To a degree it is. But what you got to do, these so-called derivatives, all they were, they don't produce anything. All of this is a gimmick to make money for Wall Street.
If I may, it's insurance. If you're a banker and you have a major $100 million water project and you don't have a derivatives clause against something that might happen, it's insurance against unusual circumstances. And if you didn't have it in there, you'd be sued for malpractice. It's an insurance system against loss.
In certain derivatives are absolutely necessary.
Right.
Like airlines want to have a derivative to protect themselves against rising in fuel costs.
Yeah, or credit. A currency valuation. Mr. Soros was able to ride that. How are you going to do it? You're going to make a contract for $10 to the lira. It's going to change to $20 for the lira. You have to have a contract
Absolutely.
to make, and you could use insurance, Lloyd's of London or something. Reinsuring, and you could have a reinsuring function within the government of an industry that could use the idea of having insurance to guarantee the level of risk is covered for particularly the things of the industrial or post-industrial economy that is sure, plain vanilla, stuff that's not going to be all in the area of venture, like a crapshoot.
Absolutely correct. And you need it, you need it for international trade for the value of your
right.
Of your
there's
currency,
a role for that,
right?
international swaps and derivatives.
And there's a role for farmers. They have to know what the prices are going to be.
Absolutely. Those are the first.
What fertilizing costs are going to be. They have to do that.
Right.
But it's going beyond that.
Okay.
So you need a derivative exchange.
Yeah, it gets to be where you can't even understand the physics of it. Yeah.
And then the credit default swaps should be made illegal. That's something else.
You. That's
that should be made illegal.
That's like some sort of Frankenstein.
It's a crapshoot, and now they have it. What's the term? They have it blind, where somebody doesn't even have an investment in anything. They just can speculate on credit default swaps.
Yeah, right.
And all it does is add more risk and leverage to the market.
Lots of bank charges.
And it's a disgrace. It has to be ended, and that's one of the reasons we have.
That'll be done politically.
And that's what the subprime mortgages were about.
Well, that also includes Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA and everything, and the dream that it's okay that something should happen so the folks can own their home if they can. The idea that people can't have a home to call home sweet home is ridiculous in a society.
You're fixated on that, But they can have a nice rental apartment. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, what are we going to keep them always dependent upon the few who own everything? There's not going to be any justice ever for the poor or the less advantaged. It'd be wonderful for you to own your own home. And if you're in an economy where you buy it for $10,000, 10 years later it's worth $40,000, it's a sure thing you're going to make. It's the only source of any net worth increase for the people.
You're assuming the bubble is never going to stop. It has stopped. developed.
Well, it took 50 years to do it. So you can have some understanding, because after the Second World War, the housing just went up steady. Steady as a rock.
Yes, and now you're getting deflation.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But that's still the idea that the people, not the crap shooters and not the hustlers and everything, the ordinary people can have a decent life and have, including a home.
I'm all for it, but a home is not an entitlement. If they want a home, they should work for it and develop the skills and ability to develop the revenue so they can buy one.
You and I disagree philosophically on that point, and it's perfectly well.
There's not enough room in this country for everybody to have a private home.
Well, that's a different way of seeing things. That's like saying, if I may, that's like saying there's no room for democracy for the mass. There's no room for justice because there's not nearly enough. There's only a little bit. It's got to be carefully developed. It's the same thing that motivated the structure of the Roman Empire and everything with slaves. The same thing within the feudal estate. But the thing is, there's a change going on in terms of our overall capability. It doesn't come out. Economics is often defined as the allocation of scarce resources. We may be overcoming, in terms of population trends and capability, material scarcity at a level that would have to be defined and so forth. We may be coming into a more brightly seen future that these systems are trying to bring some justice to the masses of the people that have mostly been exploited.
Well, you're talking about Karl Marx and Kelso again, but getting back,
Sorry.
all you have to do is look in the 5 boroughs here.
Yeah, okay.
In Manhattan, I'm very happy in my apartment.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere but New York.
And you take
You're
a look
on the
at
east side, right?
Yeah, I live at...
Wouldn't you rather live on the west side? There's more going on. The Greenwich Village. You ever go down Tompkins Square?
It's lovely there.
There's a lot of action.
I happen to have a nice apartment. I have no complaints. But you can have access to the west side of the village or anywhere else.
Well, that's true.
No matter where you live in the city.
That's true.
And what I'm like where I live, I'm surrounded by all sorts of cultural institutions, which and organizations I join. Yeah. Like Carnegie Council, which is wonderful. Yeah. Foreign Policy Association. Okay. Yeah. Organization of Americans of the Americas. The Asian Society. You got
Asian Society is great.
You got the Council on Foreign Relations. You got all these. You got the.
Are you a member of the council?
No, I'm a member of the Foreign Policy Association.
Yeah, right, okay.
And then you got the Hudson Union Society, and you got the New York Academy of Sciences, and you got all these wonderful museums.
On the west side, you got Lincoln Center, you got artists, you got jazz clubs, you got artists.
Just walk across the park, and I'm there.
All right, yeah, and it's a nice walk at that, thank you, Mr. Olmsted.
It's lovely.
Yeah, that's really right. Yeah, and New York is great. They tell me that they got 192, now we got 195 in the last couple of days. We added a couple new countries to the world, and we have sizable communities in New York City area of 189 of them. It's wonderful. Everybody in the world is here. I can't imagine anybody wanting to live anywhere else but New York City.
You walk down the street.
It's great.
You walk down the street and you hear a dozen different languages.
I know. I love it. Yeah, but a lot of people who don't like that. You could live in Ames, Iowa, and everybody speaks English, and they're of a certain complexion and all that. You know, there are places you can go.
Well, there's a lot of rednecks and narrow-minded people in this world.
That is true.
But that's okay.
Yeah, that's a.
But
even they have a charm if you go to,
look at the mix of cultures here.
Yes, sir.
The different ideas.
Yeah, I agree.
The different restaurants.
Right.
The different cultural events.
Right.
They're wonderful. For example, I am a member of the Turkish Cultural Center.
Really?
It's wonderful.
Is it?
They have such terrific programs, not only political and economic programs, but cultural programs on art and music and food. It's just terrific. And a lot of countries have the same, a lot of nationals have the same type of cultural centers.
I know a lot of people who live anywhere in the world, but they say they wouldn't want to be anywhere but New York.
I wouldn't live anywhere.
I know, I agree with you. We're in agreement on that and everything. It's just that on these questions of, are we at a time of qualitative change, do you think? You know, like you have quantitative change, you have a process, and then there comes a time of, in punctuated equilibrium in biology, you have a new species appear, there are changes. Do you think we're at a time of qualitative change in terms of the human condition within an ecological context that is at a larger level than normally we see our institutions in terms of?
And a guy like you is the key of it, because it's communications and education. When people see there's a broader world around them, and they open up their horizons and interests, they'll partake.
Do you think the thing I said before, that economics is too important to be left to the economists or the businessmen? Or the politicians.
You're getting back into that Kelso stuff.
No, not Kelso. That's not Kelso. That's just that what's going on is too large to be contained or seen adequately within the tunnel vision of the various specialized views of how we're going to deal with the information available to us.
Listen, we have a problem in this country.
We have a lot of problems.
One of the basic underlying problems is the fact that we spend more than we earn. Pretty soon the debt service...
That's a bad formula, yeah.
Pretty soon the debt service on the national debt is going to be as much as the national income. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Impossible. Okay. We had that. Do you think we had that in stagflation? You know, when was this? Carter and that, and Volcker came in.
Well, we're going to get that again.
Yeah, you think we are going to get that irreparably?
Right now, we have unemployment with a low inflation rate.
Yeah, about 10%.
Only because the rest of the world is in worse financial shape than us.
Okay, yeah, right.
The euro, and Greece, the Greece and Europe, in particular, and the southern tier of Europe and Africa, and now, by the way, most of South America is starting to pick up, particularly Brazil and Argentina, and Mexico.
Yeah.
But there's problems down there as well.
Yeah.
We cannot support the world. Every major advanced country who had a leadership role in civilization lost it because of unsustainable foreign adventures and prolificacy at home.
Right.
That formula fits us to a T. Yeah. We're a larger, in my view, a larger example of Greece.
Greece in Periclean times, or what?
No, I'm talking about current Greece.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Greece.
I was thinking
with their fiscal crisis.
Yeah.
They don't produce anything. They were borrowing money. What do you think? We're not producing anything, and we're borrowing money. We're going to have to pay the piper one of these days unless we get back into the old industrial philosophy this country had since its inception. We're going to be eaten up by China and India, okay? Because they're taking... We're educating and creating jobs for our competitors.
Okay.
We're in economic warfare. That's actually what's going on here.
Okay. What do you advise? We only got about 5 minutes or 6 minutes left. What are some of your prescriptions to the people of influence who might be viewing the program?
Well, I think they got to change their industrial policy in this country. And they got to bring back jobs. There's no sense. Why offshore? We can do outsourcing in this country. We have Appalachia. We have parts of the Midwest. We have parts of the South. People speak English.
But wait a minute.
They're reasonably educated, and they can do all these things that we're outsourcing.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I remember we had things in Detroit. The thing, you see, we can do it on market principles, and if the bankers and the people who are making the decisions and so forth can do something and get a better exchange and a greater profit by doing it in some place with slave labor, why would they want to not take advantage of the fact that they can produce it overseas and make more money for the corporation?
Well,
I mean, unless you want to violate market principles and not let the market work.
You're taking advantage of market principles because you can do the same thing here.
Well, but not to make the same level of profit, I'm saying. You can make more money by going exploiting service, no externalities or any of that stuff in another country. It's like rendering people to be tortured or something.
That's why I wrote that thing.
Why not? You can do it. You get away with it.
See,
and make more money for the stockholders, which is the bottom line.
There's a lot of things we can do. For example, we need national health.
Yeah.
All the cities and states are going bust. They're going broke.
I know, it's
with
awful.
The pension costs and the health costs.
That's right.
Not only, and these people double dipped. Some of them retire after 20 years. They double dipped. Some of them triple dipped. And not only that, the pensions are based on the last salary and overtime they had in the last year of employment. That's wrong.
Okay.
It should be the average of the last 10 years of salary without overtime.
Okay.
That
seems fair. Yeah.
And people shouldn't be able to double dip. You would eliminate that with national health and a national pension system, beefed up Social Security system. It can
beef up Social Security.
Let me finish.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And the question is, how do you pay for it?
Right.
And the only way you're going to pay for it is with a variation of a flat tax. A progressive flat tax.
A progressive. It's important.
Yeah, it's progressive, not regressive.
There are different versions of what's called a flat tax.
A VAT tax is what you're talking about is regressive. But
Stephen Forbes was in favor of a flat strategy.
He wasn't the originator. There was Alvin Rabushka of Stanford that actually taught.
Lay it out quick. We've only got about 2 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes left.
So would you need a progressive flat tax?
How would that work?
Which starts above the poverty level, so the poor don't pay taxes.
They don't pay.
And for the first 275,000, there's one rate. And the rate, by the way, the rate is actually set by the Congressional Budget Office, and maybe in conjunction with the Office of Management and Budget, with the exact cost of government services and programs. On top of that, they have an actual add-on for the actual cost of health care, another add-on surcharge for the actual cost of the beefed-up pension system, and then another actual surcharge for the actual cost of the military. Pentagon.
Well, that would be, that's their charge. They're taking track of all those numbers. Yeah.
They have those numbers.
Yeah.
And that would put an automatic brake by the voter, right, who's paying these taxes, on all this extravagances of government. It'll bring it right down to size. So you have one rate for up to 275, another one up to 500,000, and another rate above 500,000. Okay, and you eliminate all deductions. All
investment tax credits.
All of that stuff. Except, well, I want to go into in a minute.
Regressive income.
I'm talking about on the individual level.
Yeah. Okay.
You would eliminate all deductions, all tax shelters, all offshore tax havens, and you do the same thing for business. Okay.
You do this through the government of the United States.
The IRS will do that.
That's a big thing. Is there anyone within the political spectrum who's close to that, either in the Republican or Democratic Party, that could make that practical reality happen?
But let me continue.
No, but to be practical, thinking in the next election.
I'm talking about then you have the flat tax for business. You need two levels, one for domestic, and the other one for overseas, because they pay taxes overseas. So it'll be reduced by that proportion. And then again, there'd be no deductions for deductions. There'd be no offshoring. I mean tax shelters and tax havens.
They ought to find those, yeah.
However, they could expense capital investment according to an IRS schedule. Okay, there'll be no pensions, deductions for pensions, no deductions for Social Security. In other words, you force everybody to go into the public system. Okay, and with the existing pensions, it's very easy. You can convert all existing 401ks and pension funds pro rata
to Roth or
to Roth IRA, which is terrific, because for the first $500,000 there'd be no taxes.
Okay.
To offset the losses that had the pension funds and everybody else had in the stock market.
One of the problems in this universe we live in is it's only limited by time. We're out of time. Can you believe it? We have to run the credits to make sure they got your insight, and we're going to refer them all to your site, which is really one that they could get the details of this. It's been your distinct pleasure to have the perceptions of Harry Langer, a person who's given a great deal of important thought. I would ask if you could let's stay in touch with one another.
Yes.
You and I. We could talk Kelso and things and other things, but I'm wondering who in the political spectrum you might see, even as a party. Where does it fit in, this thinking, in terms of the politics that are going to be emerging this year and in 2012? But I want to shake your hand and say thank you for participating. It's been your pleasure. Tune in. We're coming back again tomorrow. But could you give a quick hint of which direction, in terms of the political structure of our economy, that would mark it closely to yours?